Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. Man, I am really excited for this show today, which I think you guys hear me say that every show, and it's okay because I do get excited about every show. And I am really happy today because I have my old guest co-host back. I have Janessa that is joining us today. Hey Janessa, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while.
Oh, it has been a while, but we understand why you had to leave. So it's okay. Like I told you, you will
Mhm.
always have a seat, always. So anytime
Great.
you reach out, you're more than welcome.
Well, I'm really excited to be back. I've missed it a ton.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
it'll be
miss
great.
it. I miss it every a ton also, and I only have to wait every week before it happens.
Yeah.
Well, guys, today we are going to be talking about addiction is the symptom, not the problem. And for those of you that listen to this show quite often and you are in long-term recovery, I know you will understand this. And I'm really hoping that those who are on the other side will get a little bit more insight on things. So before I introduce the guest, well, I'm just going to introduce the guest right now. Today, our guest is Nate Johansson, and Nate is a gifted trauma coach working with individuals, couples, and groups. He has done his own extensive therapy and intensive work. Nate knows firsthand that there truly is hope and healing available. Working with Nate, you will unpack your past, understand your present, and unlock your future. And I really like that he put that down in his bio because I think so many of us get stuck in our past trying to figure it out. And you guys have heard me say on the show many times, my buddy Nicholas T. Smith brought this up, connect the dots backwards. And if you connect your dots backwards, you'll see you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now.
Yeah.
So Nate takes advantage of the cutting edge methods. And one thing we're going to talk about today, and I gave him little heads up before the show because they use what they call a TMS and ketamine treatments. And I definitely want our listeners to understand what that is all about. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nate. How you doing, buddy?
Great, Al. Super excited for the podcast. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, you are welcome. And thank Janessa because she's the one that reached out to me and said, hey, I got this real cool guy and I think he'd be great for the show. And if it's coming from Janessa, I'm like, done. Let's do it.
Yes, thank you, Janessa.
You're welcome. We're
So,
so
Nate,
excited.
oh, go ahead. What did you say, Janessa?
Oh, I'm really excited. I've watched a lot of Nate's videos and he's got some really awesome depth of understanding. And I've heard a lot of people try to do similar things, but you're like, you can tell when they don't have a lot of understanding and depth, but Nate for sure has it. And it really caught my eye. And I was like, oh my gosh, he needs to be on here. People need to hear what he has to say. So I'm really excited to hear.
Well, and I'm glad that you reached out to me, Janessa, because of that. And, in his bio, he said he's had his own experience. And now, who else better to help us with those type of things, right? It'd be
Yeah.
like me helping my wife, who's an alcoholic, understand everything she's going through. And I've said this on the show many times, and I just shared this actually when I went out and spoke to Red Barn. I says I was my wife's therapist for 8 years, and I says, and I know why I don't have that certificate hanging up on the wall because I was a real shitty therapist because I didn't understand what the hell I was talking about, even though I thought I did.
Well,
So
and that was one of the reasons, probably the biggest reason we picked the therapist that we go to, John Taylor. He has personal experience as well, and that really like resonated with us because we're like, he has all the certification and he's awesome therapist, but he has that personal experience that I think is really invaluable. So
yeah.
it's awesome.
So
Yeah.
Nate, with all this being said, now in the bio, you talked about you've gone through a lot of stuff yourself. Is that what opened up your mind to go into that type of field?
100%. In college, I was studying for the LSAT. I was going to be an attorney. That was kind of my path. And it was actually I graduated from college, decided I wanted to at some point get married, and realized that I struggled with relationships. I kind of felt I was perfect in a lot of ways, and perfection was definitely what I was striving for. But it was just this one slice of my life that was just a dumpster fire, right? Just dating and things like that. So I thought, oh, maybe I need some help. And my therapist will kind of he's since teased me that in my first session of therapy, I said, hey, I'm basically perfect, but this one section of my life isn't great, and it may or may not have something to do with me. I don't know. And he cracked open my perfectionism, my shame, totally opened up my mind to a whole new world. And I went to therapy to get just one thing fixed, if it was even my fault. And I ended up just having my life flipped upside down. And after a few months, I just had a strong impression that this is kind of where I needed to go. And didn't really know when. Ended up taking a job in Arizona managing a TMS and ketamine clinic, and managed that for a while. And then I ran into my therapist, and he, just said, hey, are you doing that or not? You told me you had this impression, or are you doing it, or do you like your new job? Like, what's the decision? And I kind of just made my mind that it was time. So I went, got my certification in coaching, and started my master's program to become a therapist. And here I am today. So that's just a little bit of kind of what got me into this field.
Awesome.
I love hearing people's stories every week of what got them into doing what they're doing, right? And a lot of times, especially in this type of show, it was something very tragic that happened in their life to get them to open their eyes a little bit wider. However, even with something like yours, right? You wanted to go in one direction, and you just decided to work on yourself a little bit more because, and I get that perfection thing because I struggled with that a lot in my life. And one of the biggest things with my wife, who I'm married with right now, those were fighting words for me when she would say, oh, you just think you're so damn perfect, because before I did. And now I've realized I'm not even close, and I'm not even going to strive to be perfect. I'm just going to strive to be the best human being that I can possibly be, because there's no way I could be perfect, right? So you mentioned right during this little story here, you were doing the TMS and the ketamine. What is that? Let our listeners know exactly what that is.
Yeah. So I managed a TMS and ketamine clinic. My background was in business, but my passion was for mental health. I felt like that was a good fusion of the two. TMS and ketamine are essentially ways of treating mental illness or addiction in ways that don't involve the traditional pharmacy, right? So you're not picking up antidepressants, you're not picking up anti-anxiety or ADHD meds, bipolar meds. And the way that we managed it at our clinic, which I think is most consistent with what research shows, is that ketamine was used as a short-term solution. Now, a lot of our listeners probably are familiar with Special K. They hear ketamine, they think of a street drug or something you give to horses or get at the vet. Ketamine was originally used as an anesthetic in surgery, and as time went on, they began to discover it actually had a profound impact on the brain and the neuroplasticity of the brain. And so ketamine treatments are used to really calm down the brain. It's usually only a few infusions over 1 to 2 weeks. It's not meant to be a long-term solution. And I would be wary of any clinic or institution offering a long-term ketamine use, research shows that when you do, you know, between 6 to 12 ketamine infusions, there is no statistical increase in the likelihood of substance abuse, right? So that's very reassuring. But research, we don't have a lot of research for once ketamine is used on a very long term, right? So short-term ketamine can be very effective at getting you out of your fight or flight, flipping that switch, getting into a calm, more logical thinking space. With a significant, with a big enough dose, some people even have, I'm wary to use the word a psychedelic experience, but something like that, right? Where they have, you know, I worked with one patient who on his 5th or 6th ketamine infusion just had a profound experience where he was in the palm of a giant hand, and he looked the direction of where the hand was coming and just heard this booming voice of "you always knew." And I talked to him about 2 months after that happened, and he said, I got a feeling in me that day that's still there. It hasn't left. And so for him, it was very powerful, right? So that's the ketamine. The TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it's a non-invasive way of treating mental illness. And to just cut to the chase, I think in 10 years, we're going to be seeing way more TMS and way less medication. Magnetic waves are relatively benign to the brain. When you look at the side effects on a bottle of meds, it's, you know, half a page. When you look at the side effects of TMS, it's relatively, there aren't. You might get a slight headache the first week or two. You know, I think it's 0.0001% experience seizures, and that's usually because they go into the procedure like high or on drugs and haven't disclosed that. And if your brain is extremely stimulated with marijuana and we stimulate it with magnets, it's just not going to go well.
Yeah.
So and that is a long-term solution. So typically patients will do TMS daily for about 36 sessions. That's what most insurances will allow. And what it does is it retrains the neural pathways in your brain. And specifically in addiction, we're very used to using certain neural pathways, right? So neural pathways connect our sensory inputs to behaviors, right? So for me, I might see a Costco and think, oh, I should go in there and spend some money, right? That's a neural pathway my brain has developed. Whereas a husband of a very spendy wife might see Costco and his heart rate starts to go up because he's like, dang it, I hate Costco. I lose so much money to Costco, right? So we have these thought patterns, right? For an addict, it might connect, I'm feeling pain, I should go masturbate in the bathroom, right? I'm feeling pain, I should just go grab a drink. And those neural pathways, when we use them, they get strengthened, right? So once I've used that thought 1,000,000,000 times, it's a 10-lane highway in my brain. And if I try to funnel thoughts any other direction, it's just not going to take, right? So you say to the addict, hey, you're in a lot of pain. Instead of masturbating in the bathroom, you should go connect with a bunch of men, right? Go get some connection. And they're going to be like, yeah, 10-lane highway. I'd rather masturbate in the bathroom, right? And knowing that it helps us understand it better, right? So the TMS is essentially inserting foot traffic in the brain that we can direct down other neural pathways, which is why I would recommend doing TMS in conjunction with therapy to learn what can I be thinking during my TMS sessions to channel the traffic where I want it to go. So if you're to do TMS, and some clinics will even have a physician or a technician in the room that does almost life coaching with you while you're getting the stimulation. You'll focus on things like gratitude, optimism, positivity, and it's gonna essentially fortify those other neural pathways that previously you haven't used because you've had ones that have been way bigger and way easier, right? And so you'll start to see somebody responding to a situation completely different just because through TMS and ketamine, they've improved the neuroplasticity of their brain. And so they've improved their ability to use other neural pathways than the ones they've been using. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it definitely does. Because again, I'm going to mention my friend Nicholas. He talks about that, how we have the capability of unplugging any neuron we want to unplug and plug. He goes, picture an outlet, right? And I like to use the analogy like plug your vacuum in and you're vacuuming and it's on and it's off and it's on and it's off, and it's because the prongs inside the outlet eventually they start wearing out, so it's not connecting right. We have that ability to unplug it and go over and plug it into a different neuron. However, there is that learning process, right? Because again, it's been plugged into that socket for how many years? Now, when you're talking with the TMS, unless I missed it, is it something that you hook up to them? Is it so that's what it is. It's you're plugging some stuff up to them, and then you also use the ketamine at the same time?
So ketamine and TMS will be done separately,
Okay.
right? Ketamine is typically done in a room with a nurse. There's like a slow drip infusion. TMS, there's a variety of different TMS machines out there. It's essentially either a helmet that's placed on or like a probe that looks like a figure eight that's placed against the skull. Patients will usually be wearing like a cap, and it's like a stimulation. It'll feel like almost like a tapping on the head. For those who have done like CAT scans, and there's that knocking sound, those are those magnetic waves. So you hear a knocking, you feel the tapping. It's not painful. It can be as most as uncomfortable, but typically it's very tolerable.
Wow. And you said that there are some insurance companies that actually cover that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Most insurances are going to require certain med trials and therapy trials prior to them paying for TMS, right? So, I think UHC, for example, United Healthcare, a lot of people have that. You need to have trialed 2 antidepressants and then they'll pay for it, right? Or Select Health, I can't remember. I was in Arizona and Select Health is more Utah insurance. But yeah, usually it's just a couple med trials and some therapy, and then insurance will cover it.
That's
awesome.
crazy. I mean, it is awesome, right? And I mean, it's great that they are covering it. However, it still doesn't make sense for me that, oh, let's give them some drugs first, right?
Mhm.
So they're going to get some money one way or another. That's how I'm picturing it, right? Because I'm just against prescription drugs, and I'm really starting to have issues with insurance companies as well.
Yeah,
I think JANESSA's
yeah,
heard me say this on the show quite a bit, that we're leaving the life of our loved ones in the hands of insurance companies when it comes to recovery, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Because all pharmaceutical based in my eyes, and there are some treatments and there are some prescriptions that help a lot of people. I'm not knocking them all, which I want to make sure that's always said on the show, because I'm not knocking them all. However, I think it's just too much, and I
Definitely.
really like that. Say that again, Janessa.
Oh, I was just saying, agreeing that, there is definitely a need, but I believe that they are definitely abused and overused and overprescribed. So,
Yeah, definitely overprescribed. Yeah, that is really cool. I'd be interested in even trying that, just to see what it's like, because
Yeah.
it almost to me sounds like the functional health, right? Because functional health is really starting to grow, and I know the health industry is not liking it, because
Yeah.
it's taking patients out of their office where, again, they can pull out a pad and go, okay, here's a prescription, go over to Target or Smith's or CVS and fill this and let me know how it goes for you.
Yeah, no, there's not a person I know that I wouldn't recommend at least doing TMS. And I say that because there's virtually no negative side effect, right? Nothing. Whereas, if I were to say, hey, just try, sertraline, just try Xanax, just try bupropion, it could go wrong, right? It could go bad. With TMS, it's a magnetic pulse, super benign, nothing bad could happen. And just like taking a hurt muscle that's dead and taking it to like a massage and starting to get that blood flowing, stimulating the brain, it just gets it almost gets the blood flowing. It gets the neuro transmitters firing again. And in every case, that's going to be beneficial. So we would even have doctors do TMS just to see what the patients were experiencing. And after their 36 sessions, report improved memory, improved focus. Their wife would say, hey, we've got a family reunion in 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. And instead of them going, yeah, talk to me in 6 weeks, they go, oh, okay, let's plan it, right? They'd have that almost like that more capacity to function, right? And so I think even when TMS was getting FDA approved, the Board of Ethics paused because they were concerned TMS would be abused to improve IQ. Because it's just healthy brain massage. I don't know how else to say it. So
Not a bad.
I think
Yeah,
Janessa and I
right?
got the same look on our face when you said that. It's like, what?
Sign me up.
Right. Yeah, right. And unfortunately, improved IQ is not a side effect of most antidepressants. So that's why I'd say I'd recommend the TMS to everybody, especially if you can get it covered by insurance. Ketamine won't be covered by insurance. Using it for depression, addiction, mental illness is not FDA approved. They would call that off-label use, which doesn't mean it's not researched. It just means it's not FDA approved, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be more expensive to do ketamine, but it can be very powerful over the short term. So if I had a spouse or myself or a friend who was in a really bad spot, and we're like, are we going to make it through this week? Are we going to make it through this month? What price wouldn't you pay to just get them to calm down, to get back into their body? And so ketamine infusions can do that. And so I think ketamine infusions can save a lot of lives. But if going to that, I would have a long-term solution in place, whether that's a therapist or TMS or something, to go hand in hand with the ketamine infusions.
In your experience, with like traditional therapy versus the ketamine treatments, are you saying that it's a lot faster than traditional therapy? Because essentially therapy, you're wanting to do the same thing, retrain your brain to go a different way than the 10-lane highway you've programmed it to go. Are you saying that the ketamine does it a lot faster, or does it?
So the ketamine is gonna, I've used this word neuroplasticity. It's gonna really increase neuroplasticity. What neuroplasticity is essentially your neurons' ability to trade and create to be something different, right? So we think of like a very rigid framework versus a fluid framework, right? So things like exercise, gratitude, certain spiritual activities, those are all going to improve neuroplasticity. Ketamine just does it, I don't know how we say it, artificially, or it does it inorganically. So it kind of makes it happen. And so if you combine ketamine and while the brain is fluid, we're doing therapy, that can be a really good way to capitalize on, because we've also talked to somebody who's just so rigid, right? So stuck. And so if we were to give them some ketamine, right, we're going to see them become a little more relaxed, a little more fluid, and then we can almost take advantage of that to talk about, positive thoughts that are going to help their life instead of destroy their life. And so we're going to see improvements. And it's interesting, if you look at it from, in a lot of religion, a lot of Christianity, the word repentance is a big word people hear, which that comes from the root, the Latin is metanoia, which means new mind, which I find very interesting because whether it's therapy, whether it's awareness, meditation, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's ketamine, whatever it is, where you're developing a new mind, it's oftentimes almost that concept of repentance that improves you as a person and equips you to better handle life, right? So a lot of people think repentance and they think, oh, I gotta go, lay prostrate on the floor and pray for forgiveness and hope because I'm such this miserable creature, instead of repentance just being, I'm gonna start to see things differently, right? You make somebody right 10 things they're grateful for every day for 30 days, we're going to start to see a new mind, right? They're going to see the world differently with that new mind. And so when it comes to looking at your treatment options, we've got, therapy, ketamine, TMS, coaching, mindfulness, whatever. A lot of the question we might ask is, what's going to help you develop a new mind, right? Are you so stuck that we need to get some ketamine involved, some TMS? And there's no shame in that, right? It's just where you're at currently. And okay, that's where we start. But let's say you're like active in recovery, you've been like changing your perspective on things actively, just noticing your weaknesses, your character defects, and you're improving and things like that, then activities like awareness and joining groups and reading books and therapy are going to be super effective. So it's just kind of where you're at.
Yeah, and I love that there's that option. I love learning about all these different avenues and stuff. And what intrigues me is like when Tyrell and I were in recovery, it was so intense and so hard because you have to every single day be on top of your thoughts. You have to like you're constantly retraining them and telling them to go one way, writing things down. I mean, when we got into our therapy program, we went all the way. We went like probably 100 miles per hour, probably. I don't know. We get a little like when we do something, we go all the way in it, and which I'm grateful for, but like it was so exhausting and it kicked our trash. And so I'm like, "Gall, if you're doing that work anyway, that's almost like giving you a break when you are like," because there were some days that I'm like, I don't have it in me today. I am so mentally, emotionally exhausted. I don't have it in me. And so you'll almost like you kind of have to take a mental emotional break sometimes in your therapy work. Because if I don't, I'm going to get a massive migraine. I'm going to, I don't know. I get so exhausted, and I know Tyrell's the same way. But like having this option, like when you are exhausted, it's like it's almost like a break. We're gonna take this and help you all out with this, so you're not having to run the whole way yourself. Which I'm like, oh my gosh, that would help. That would definitely make you go faster and be more efficient, I guess. And that is so cool because, man, that I love that idea. So
it sounds like to me that so I go to a place called Awaken Health every Tuesday, and it's chiropractor treatment, except it's not the snap, crackle, pop, right? Because I've had that done before, and you walk in there, and within 5 minutes of them snapping your neck where you just felt like you got hung, and them bending you over and cracking your back, and you're done. They use a little tool that looks like, and I don't remember the name of it. It looks like a T-handled Allen wrench, basically, and you can adjust it. And it's got the spring in it. So when they hit the button, it thumps you, kind of like what you were saying, what the TMS does, right? It's like that little pounding in your head, or like tapping. And what that does is it hits the nerves. So imagine you're outside and you've got your garden hose on and you're stepping on the hose, right? You don't get a lot of water out of the end of it. But as you start releasing your foot off that pressure, you got a full stream. So that's what this treatment does, is opens up those nerves. So you're getting the full signals going through those nerve endings to go where it needs to go to help heal your body, correct your body, have the muscles react. And it sounds like this is exactly what this TMS is as well, except it's just not doing it in your back and your legs. It's doing it up here where your whole body's being ran.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful to watch, right? You see men are very, and these are generalizations, but men are very attached to doing things, to working, right? And so when you see a man who's struggling with addiction or depression or anxiety, often what you're going to see is that what they're doing is starting to go down, right? So there's a lot more not doing. And as they get healthy, the doing increases, right? So you talk to someone, day one, and they're hating their job, they're absent as a father, right? They're just not doing much. And then you get to the end of treatment, and not only are they loving work, they start a little side hustle, they're super present in the home, they're helping out with the kids, they're doing dishes or things like that. And that's a sign of almost like a healthy man, right? Is the doing. And with women, it was very, very interesting to see as they went through their TMS and ketamine, the physical differences as they would walk in. So you'd start to see less pajamas, right? More different clothes, all of a sudden they're curling their hair, they're doing their makeup, and they're creating social connections. So they went out with their friends again, they called their mom again, and those were kind of some of the indicators that we were making some progress. And it was just beautiful to watch. The healing looks different, and that in and of itself is beautiful. But I'd love to pivot with your guys' permission to I love the TMS, love the ketamine, but currently super passionate about the work we can do, coaching or in therapy, and kind of this concept that addiction is the symptom. And Al, when you talk to people who either have a spouse that's addicted or themselves have an addiction, do you often find that they are fixated on the acting out behavior, or that they're doing some deeper digging?
I think both from what I've seen. Some is the acting out behavior. You know, gosh, even with my wife, right? That's how it seems is more of the behavior part of things.
Yeah.
And it's the same for me, right? Even being on the other end, it's my behavior that I think also, I don't know, it's like trying to push a boulder through a wall.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible, right? But yet you continue to try to push that boulder through the wall. Did
Yeah.
I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a cycle of, and I guess before I move on, Janessa, you were kind of shaking your head. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, just from my experience, when Tyrell and I were going through therapy, we went through with, I think, 7 other couples. And so it was a really amazing experience to see everyone else going through very similar things, but everyone's was so different. All the it was, the wives were the betrayed, and the husbands all were the addicts in this situation. And I know it's not always that way. A lot of the time it's, other times it's they had a women's group where the women were the addicts and the husbands were the betrayed. But in our case, it was all the women were betrayed and all the men were the addicts. And it was, amazing to see that a lot of them had the same we're experiencing very similar things. Like we could all relate and be like, oh my gosh, same here, but they all had different fetishes and different, acted out differently. But something that I saw that a lot of us had in common, I would say the majority of us, is in the beginning, we fixated, like you said, on the actual acting out. Like, oh my gosh, if my husband just wouldn't relapse again, all of this would go away. And as time went on, I was like, when Tyrell stopped relapsing frequently, it was like instead of, every single day or multiple times a day, and it went from, once a week, and, and it started spacing out a lot further. I was like, he's not relapsing as much, but man, he is such a butthead still. Like, I can't stand this. And I started focusing more on, it's not so much relapsing, it's more the behavior that I am not okay with. And also my own, like I was obviously feeding the monster unknowingly, and some that also in the first week of therapy, I remember going, And the therapist was like, any questions? And I'm like, this better work. I'm like, I shouldn't even have to be here, you know. I was
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
pissed and so fed up. I was like, it's not my problem, it's his. And as we went on, I was like, you know, I I cope differently, you know, just because I don't have this addiction. I cope differently, and I have just as much to work on and heal from as he did. And that was a huge slap in the face for me to realize
Yeah.
that. And, but, you know, as time went on, and even now, like if Tyrell were to relapse again, like it would be sad for me. But more importantly, I'd be like, what happened, obviously, but you're still kind, you're still helping out, you haven't gotten back into that addictive behavior, which is the worst. That was so hard to deal with. And so I really, when you said that, I'm like, yeah, I see that a lot of the time. You know, in the beginning we fixate on the the acting out rather than the actual behavior itself.
And
So going on that, and I think this is going to be super helpful for addicts, for their spouses, for their friends and family, is I'm just going to paint a picture of a cycle of addiction that I bet you probably haven't heard, and is just super helpful. So we're going to imagine just 4 steps. So at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, we have pain. At the core of every of addiction, and we could do an episode on this, and I would defend this to my grave. This is the hill I'll die on. It's about needs. It's about needs getting met or not getting met, right?
Mhm.
When we don't get our needs met, we feel pain. And how the addiction cycle works is the pain that we have at the top starts to lead to the first step in that addictive behavior is what I call preoccupying or thinking about it. This is the moment where acting out becomes an option for you. So man, let's say I'm at work and I just feel so unappreciated. And I have a need to feel like I belong and like I'm seen, right? And I just feel unappreciated. I feel like my boss doesn't care. I feel like my wife doesn't care. I feel like nobody cares. I'm just a paycheck, right? And I'm sitting with that pain. I'm at my desk and I think, man, I could go to the bathroom and masturbate, actually. I could hop on Instagram, I could do TikTok, I could just get on the internet and look at porn, right? We start to think about things. And the thinking leads to the bottom of that circle, which is our rituals. And our rituals are the behaviors that we start to do in order to act out. So this is, I'm going to go back and I'm going to lock my door. This is, I'm going to go step into a bathroom. This is, I'm going to wait for the kids to fall asleep. I'm going to check on them a few times. And this is all just part of my routine, right? I'm going to silence my phone. I'm going to, tell my wife I'm going to run to the gas station, right? It's the behavior where we're starting to put it into play. And that ultimately leads to that 4th step of the cycle, which is acting out. And I have yet to meet somebody knee deep in their addiction who doesn't feel an enormous amount of shame about their acting out, right? So what is the acting out going to cause? Pain, right? And all of a sudden we're back in it. And so I find a lot of people look at that acting out and they're like, how do we stop the acting out? How do we get rid of this, right? And on a very superficial level, we're just focusing on the acting out. If we roll back the clock and we look at the rituals, we've dove in just a little bit deeper, right? So let's say your thing is that you're always masturbating in the bathroom. Well, I bet if I took all the doors off of all the bathrooms, we could get rid of that problem, right? And we just totally disrupt your rituals, right? Or if it's going to the bar and getting a drink, but the closest bar is 20 miles away, if we just get rid of your car, we're going to interrupt the rituals, right? And that's one way to do it. And I see a lot of, once people can get past just the acting out, they start focusing on that. Let's put a VPN on your phone. Let's do this. Let's get rid of your rituals, right? But if we dive even a step further, we get to those those thoughts, the thinking about it. What makes addiction seem like an option to you? What, when does that thought first occur? And if I'm working with a client, I'm not asking, when did you think about it? I'm asking, what minute did you think about it? Well, last time I acted out was Tuesday. Okay, well, when did it become an option to act out? Was it at breakfast? And they're going to say, oh, I don't know, I can't remember. And we're going to push and push and push until we realize, yeah, it was after my boss yelled at me. I kind of thought, I do have a phone and I could go to the bathroom. We start to focus on that. But to really address addiction, in my experience, we have to rewind the clock all the way back to that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a little pro tip. If your addict or you as an addict don't know what pain you're medicating with, stop acting out, and that pain is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. This is why you mentioned Tyrell would stop acting out, but was still being a grouch, right?
Yeah.
Because now that pain is just building and building and building. And he's not, the acting out is just a maladaptive way of meeting the need. Does it work? Yes. Does it suck? Yes. Does it hurt people? Yes. But it works. And if most of us had a super clear path to getting our needs met, we would just take it, right? But we don't know how. We've learned bad things. We have these maladaptive habits, right? So we can rewind the clock. And what pain are you coping with? Let's see if you can get 30 days without acting out. And I bet it's just going to be blaring in your mind all the time. I just suck, right? Nobody sees me. I'm not enough, right? Some message is going to be just bulging out of your eyeballs. And that is the need that needs to be met.
Yeah.
You get that person to, who feels so unloved. If we just inject perfect love, right, the acting out just fades away, right? When we just focus on the acting out, it frequently, and I bet we could get a lot of people to raise their hand and say amen, frequently makes things worse, because they already feel a lot of shame about the acting out, right? And so that shame just amps up the pain. The pain amps up the thinking, amps up the rituals, amps up the acting out.
Well,
And so,
yeah, there you go.
no, please.
Oh, I was just gonna add, when you don't go all the way to 12 o'clock and find out what is the pain, then, and you just focus on the rituals and the acting out, and you're like, great, you're not relapsing anymore. Well, they're gonna find another addiction. And I see that so much where they're like, yeah, they're not looking at porn anymore. But my heck, they're like 400 pounds now because they can't stop eating. Or they're gaming all the time. They don't spend time with their family. They're on their electronic device the entire time. But, hey, the least they're at porn. And that, I'm like, well, you didn't fix the problem. You just took away one toy and they're now found another one. Like, you have to address that pain. And I agree with you 100%. Like, I see that so much.
I'd like to elaborate off of that too, if I may, before you go into more, Nate. So my wife relapsed after 2.5 years sober. She relapsed. It's been coming up on 4 weeks ago. And it's kind of crazy because about the last 3 to 4 months, maybe even more, I started noticing old behaviors coming back, right? And it was that I wasn't paying enough attention to her. All I cared about was my podcast and speaking. And I was this and I didn't do that. And I started noticing she's using me, right, as the reason why she's feeling the way that she's feeling.
Yeah.
And I've said this before in a lot of shows, and even in the depths of her addiction, I'm sure JANESSA saw this as well with Tyrell, it's that hamster wheel, right? And you even mentioned it, Nate. We get back on there, right? And then they relapse, and then of course the guilt kicks in, and then we start going back through that same circle. And with what you just shared with us, just this little bit here, the last 10 minutes, I've seen this. I said this to my wife's public offender 3 years ago. You've got to figure out what's going on inside here. because
Yeah.
it's not the frickin' alcohol that's causing the problem. Whatever is inside here. And this last time that she relapsed, that's what I started seeing. I started seeing what's inside here starting to bubble up again, right? It's starting to fester. And, you know, like if you get a sliver and you don't get that sliver out pretty soon, it starts getting real sore, right? And then a few days later, it starts turning white, and then you could squeeze it and this pus starts coming out of it. That's what I started seeing in her.
Yeah.
However, every time I made a comment about it, I'm being her daddy. I'm treating her like she's a little kid. And then pretty soon she acts on it, right? It just happens. So that's this cycle that you're talking about, right? And even with what JANESSA talked about earlier, we fall right back into that trap. I've said many times, I was addicted to my wife's addiction. My life revolved around her addiction, and I think JANESSA probably might be able to say the same thing, because we end up hooking that frickin' ball and chain to our ankle too, and we start going down that same dark rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, you know, on this podcast, you know, we're talking about the other side of addiction. We're talking about the spouse, the friend, the family member. You know, there's a lot of things we can learn, we can take away from this cycle, right? And I preface everything I'm about to say by saying, you have every right to be out of that relationship. If that's what you want, right? You have every right. Oftentimes, addictions are maladaptive ways of getting our needs met, and they often hurt other people, right? And the addict has to acknowledge that. But a helpful thing to acknowledge as the friend or the support is that the addict is being hijacked by their pain and their wound, right? Very little to do with you, very and has a lot to do with them and their own things, right? So as a trauma coach, as I work with people, I feel like I've had to learn the second language of translating, right? So when wife says to husband, all he cares about is his podcast, I have to do the translating and go, oh, you feel, let me do some communication for you. You are feeling unseen for whatever reason, whether that's your fault or his fault or not, that's the feeling, right? So how can we address that? How can we get past the blame game? How can we get past the communication problems that are causing you to not just say, hey, Al, today I just need some extra cuddles. Today I just need some time. Can you tell me 5 things that you love about me, even in all my problems, right? And then all of a sudden we're talking to the pain, right? And we're getting to the pain. But most addicts can't articulate the pain because they feel so attacked, right? They feel so attacked about their behavior. And so if you just create a safe space for them to talk about it, oftentimes it can be very productive. Now I can hear the spouse already saying, well, yeah, but I don't want to create a safe space because it hurts me. At which point I say, okay, then don't. Right? If you don't want to be that person, if you don't want to hold that space, you have that right. Get out of there, right? But don't do this thing where you're like, I will support you, but I'm going to carry a grudge the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to be here to help you, but like secretly my resentment is just building and building. And you know, I know of a client that was working his butt off, finally got sober just in time for his partner to say, yeah, we're not doing this, right? And just left. And, you know, it shows us it had little to do with the addiction and a lot to do what was going on inside of her, right? And whether she was showing up honestly or whether she was trying to force herself to do something. And so that's why I would say of all the couples I know that survive recovery, both of them were getting help. Both of them were doing work, right? And of all the couples I know that did not survive recovery, one of them was the addict and the other one was the healthy one waiting for them to be better, right?
Sounds like
And
my
that is just a
relationship.
hard place.
I mean,
It's a hard place
seriously.
to grow.
Yeah. And it's crazy because we did 12 weeks of marriage counseling, right? And our marriage counselor said exactly what you just said, Nate. Exactly what you just said, because she's so codependent on me. Her happiness determines my act, or, you know, her happiness is fixated off of my actions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally.
Instead of working on her and even saying things differently, right? Because he even said that instead of saying this, why don't you just say that? Right.
Yeah.
And it came back on me, right? I don't want to paint the picture like it was just her, because there was some things I was saying wrong too that I could have said in a better way.
Yeah.
Except
And
it's
that's why I
hard
think,
when one is doing it and the other one's not.
yeah. And the way to make sure everybody stays okay and gets their needs met is boundaries. And boundaries is kind of a buzzword. I feel like it's largely misunderstood, right? We think boundaries and we're like, if you do that one more time, or like you better stop doing it's like how we control other people,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Really, boundaries are meant to be almost like a warning to somebody you're with. It's a notice. It's a hey, heads up, right? It's an if-then statement. And it has nothing to do with them changing their behavior. If you act out again, that is something that me and all my human imperfection, I'm too hurt to help. And so if you do that, I will leave because I need to go get my needs met. And I just want you to know, right? Now, it's not a boundary if you don't actually do it, right? So it's got to be a boundary that you're going to follow through on. And the addict can have a boundary too. When I act out, if you shame me and make me feel like crap, I will go hang out with my friends because I'm needing somewhere to feel love and not just feel like doing it all over again, right? And everybody has their voice to say, I'm not willing to do that, right? I'm not willing to work with that. In which case, enforce your boundary, right? Follow through. And so many people use boundaries to control other people, right? If you do that, I'm blah, blah, blah. And oftentimes they don't because they're in this, like you said, Al, this codependent relationship where they actually are kind of like getting their needs met off of each other. And so it's like, I'll leave, but I won't actually leave because I'm getting some of my self-esteem from my relationship with you. And that's the work I need to do in this relationship so that while you're healing, I can work on my codependence. And I remember the first time I met a couple that had been in recovery for years. And I met it was an addict, a sexual addict was the male, the female was the betrayed. And she was bulletproof. And I don't mean she was standoffish. I don't mean she was rude. I just mean she was like the least codependent person I've ever met.
Mm.
She could say, yeah, yeah, he acted out and it was totally inappropriate and it hurt me. And but why was I staying and why did I she just was so secure in her sense of self. And I remember just being so profoundly impacted by that because so often we meet people that are trying to make everyone happy, right? And you could just tell that was the furthest thing from her mind. She had learned to be okay in her own skin with her own boundaries, right? And he had to deal with that. And it actually ended up being just a power couple because they were both their own person. And they had made the contract, they'd set the boundaries. How can we relate to each other in a relationship where we both get our needs met? And that's boundaries, right? Boundaries is just ensuring that we all get our needs met.
And some to add on that, I think with boundaries is respect. That is something that was huge for Tyrell and I. Is like, obviously respect and boundaries go hand in hand, but like I respect Tyrell that I will respect his boundary. I feel like I had to gain that respect back. And you don't have to trust somebody in order to respect them. You can respect them and not trust them. And that was something that was foreign to me. I felt like, you don't trust me, you won't be able to respect me or anything like that. It's like, no, I can love you and respect you. But right now I don't trust you, but that's okay. We'll get there. And something like in the beginning with Tyrell and I, we realized when we were doing therapy together, we were triggering each other so much. And I was trying to save him and do everything for him. And he was trying to like make me happy, but then, would relapse. And it was just this awful cycle. And we realized, no, you need to go heal and I need to go heal. So we actually separated. We did separate physically for a while, but more like you deal with your stuff and I'll deal with my stuff. We're not in a
Yeah.
place right now where we can deal with each other's stuff. Like you have to go to your therapist, your friends. I go to my therapist, my friends. And we did that for a few years actually. And it hasn't been for, the past probably 3 years we started doing we got back into couples therapy because we had to get a control on those. And our therapist worked specifically on communicating with each other and stop trying to like beat around the bush. Just say it. Just say, you know what, that really hurt when you did that, and I'm not okay with that. Before, Tyrell and I are both huge people pleasers, and it was always hard because we're always like, yeah, that hurt my feelings, but it's okay, but it was like, no, you need to stop it. You need to say, that hurt my feelings. I don't appreciate when you do that, but say it in a respectful way. It doesn't have to be an accusing, like once you do that, your defenses go up, and then you're gonna have to wait a while until you can settle down. But like that was huge. And learning how to communicate in a respectful way, but also very direct. Because if you're not direct, then you're not gonna get anywhere. You're not gonna know why or what the main cause was,
Well, and I think you said it too, JANESSA. I'm glad that you brought that up because it seems like I'm going through a therapy session with you guys right now, right? Because of everything that's happening in my life, right? And I hope you're not charging per hour, Nate. Because that was one of the things we talked about, boundaries. I had my boundaries. We're separated right now, right? And I felt like I needed that separation because I needed to figure out me during this and give her that space to allow her to figure out her, also because of the respect. So see, the past me, I would stay right here. We would stay right here in the same box. And the whole time I would find every little freaking thing I could to nitpick and to complain about her when she's already feeling bad about her. Right. So I knew, which I've said on the show many times, I knew if I stayed this or we stayed in that same box, I'm just going to be pissing fuel on the fire. And it's taken me a lot of years to figure this out, right? Because I did the same routine over and over and over again, trying to do like you, JANESSA, trying to please her, trying to be me. I'm trying to be the knight in shining armor riding in on my stallion, and and realized actually my armor's tarnished and my horse isn't white, it's black or polka dotted orange. I don't know. It's definitely not the right one. So I love that we fell into this subject because really seriously, it's like exactly what I'm going through right now. Well, I will just say me, my wife and I, right? Because it is both of us. It's what we are both going through right now. And it's tough. It's tough to have her away because I'm getting to the point where a lot of my anger and broken heart is starting to diminish. And I'm starting to get to where I'm missing her. I mean, we've been together 18 years, right? However, I can't fall into that trap either because I know I still have to figure some things out on my end. And if we're together during that, we're not going to work on what we need to work on because we're going to be too busy pointing fingers at one another. And that's one of the worst things we can do.
Yeah. In a relationship, it's so common for communication to either not happen or to come out sideways, right? So when, let's say my wife does something and it actually really hurts me, kind of like what JANESSA was just describing, me not communicating is either me just being grumpy for the rest of the day, not talking to her, or me pretending everything's fine and just saving that resentment for later when I want to blow up. It coming out sideways is blaming my partner for what I'm experiencing. Hey, you said that, and like that, like this is all your fault, blah, 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 blah. And communication coming out just straightforward is my experience. It's speaking from the I. It's not the you, it's the I. Man, I feel like such a piece of crap when you say those things. And I know that's like a me thing, but here comes the boundary. But like, if you say things like that, I'm definitely going to be just like out for the rest of the day. Like, I know I'm not perfect. I wish I could just boom, just, you know, dodge the bullets and like water off a duck's back. But like, wow, that hurt. Right. And it's so much easier to respond as a partner. And I think our partners can sometimes surprise us with how loving they are when we give them communication like this instead of out the back door and inside. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's been such a fascinating experiment with my wife and I as we've learned to just communicate like that. It requires you to be vulnerable. And it also requires when you're vulnerable and you say, oh, like that really hurt, and your partner's not in the right frame of mind, and they start shaming and blaming, that lack of respect that you were talking about, Janessa, for you to not join, but to hold your ground and say, like, wow, and now I feel like regretting being vulnerable because I feel like you're just like taking this opportunity to bash me in. Right. And if you can just stay in that place of honesty, right, and not join the game, not join the fist fight, you stay in that place, you give the partner either a chance to finally calm down and do the same thing back. And then we start to create some intimacy, or to just die on their hill of like, I am not going to do this with you. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm just going to, I'm not willing to go there. And that's informational for you as a person to know that that's at least where you're at, right?
Yeah. There's Tyrell and I always know when there's resentment building up in our relationship is when we start making sarcastic comments to each other.
Sounds
Like I'll
familiar.
say something and I'm like, you know, I'll say something kind of sassy or like sarcastic to him, and then he'll do it back, and it's kind of like playful banter, but there's some, you're like, yeah, I'm pissed, and we'll both go back and forth, and then we'll stop and be like, oh my gosh, there's something going on here we need to talk about because this is going too far, you know. And I feel like sarcasm has truth in it, and yeah, you're being kind of goofy and silly, but underneath it you're like, yeah, that actually really hurt. Do you really think that, you know? And that's like a huge red flag for us. Like, oh, we're being sarcastic, let's go, tonight let's talk, or if we can't, right then, or
Yeah.
something. I really admire Tyrell about this. Like he's very level-headed. Like he's not very emotional. He doesn't get like, he doesn't ever like yell or blow up or anything like that. He's very he I feel like he's very level-headed. And so a lot of the time, and I'm very emotional, I'll be like, what the, and I'll get fired up, and he'll be like, hey Ness, like, are we good to talk now, or should we calm down and come back a little later? And I'm like, no, I can calm down. Or I'll be like, okay, yeah, let's do it later. Or he'll do that for himself. He's like, I'm getting really fired up, let's talk later. And we do that,
That's
like I said,
awesome.
out of respect for each other. We've had to really work on that because it was not like that before.
Yeah.
It was, you, like you said, you build up that resentment, and we would both act like everything's fine, yeah, I'm good. And then the straw that would break the camel's back, it would be like spewing lava coming out, being like, you did this and this and this and this, and it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't you just tell me in the moment? But it would just like come out like a freaking Niagara Falls. And when we see that resentment building up, I'm like, oh, I need to get it out now, so I'm not
Yeah.
playing it up, and it's not gonna all come out later in one big spew.
Yeah. Yeah, sarcasm is one of the many ways that we communicate sideways, right? Instead of just direct. And the beautiful finished product of all of this hard work and the working through boundaries and the respecting each other is just like you said, it's when you start to learn to take care of everything in the moment, right? So so wife says, hey, are you gonna put your shoes on the shoe rack? And me as husband saying, question, was that like a genuine question, or are you like complaining about me being dirty? And then wife can sit back and go, and can tell, and can either say, no, I was just asking a question, and you go, oh, okay. Or wife can sit back and say, you're right, I kind of meant that, and I think I've been a little, you left like your ice cream bowl in the sink last night, and I think I'm like letting that be a thing for me. And I can say, oh, okay, hey, I apologize about that. I'll move my shoes, and next time with the ice cream, I'll make sure I wash the bowl. And then we're jamming, right? We're turning these things that used to cause fights into just opportunities to grow intimacy, and learning the beautiful thing, which is trusting that somebody loves you. Really, despite their flaws, their struggles, they're not trying to hurt you. And a lot of us can't say that, you know. Were you trying to hurt me? And oftentimes the answer is, yeah, actually I was. I did mean that in a hurtful way. And as you can just both become honest with yourselves, you start to mean less harm. Instead of the blaming and the attacking, we're both showing up from my perspective, from your perspective. And so when we say things, we can ask questions without it feeling like an attack, right? And bringing this back around to addiction, we start treating relapses like re-encounters with pain. And instead of responding with anger, we say, well, you must be struggling with something, or do you want to, like, how are you feeling? And when your partner sees you grab the acting out and just brush it aside to look straight into their eyes and give them love, oh my gosh, say goodbye to the addiction. They will feel so seen and so loved, and just so not shamed. It opens the door to start this process of honesty, of seeing each other, and of showing love and not meaning harm. So I think that's the beautiful kind of thing that we all strive towards, is to just show up as a benign partner who cannot be perfect, but can be honest, right?
Mhm.
And I think we need honest partners, not perfect partners.
I love that.
I do too. However, I think you still, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, you're the professional, not me, because again, I don't have their certificate on the wall. To be able to deal with that though, don't you still have to feel somewhat good about yourself, don't you? Because, you know, I usually, like with what has just recently happened to me, I dealt with it with anger again, right? And it was like, how can you freaking do this? How can you do this to us? You know, how can you do this to me? I can't believe you're going down this damn road again, right? So I'm back to throwing daggers again, right? It's
Yeah.
and eh, man, it's
And
such a
Al,
hard grasp.
if we were to go to your anger in that moment and grab the mask off of his head and pull it off, who would we find behind all the anger?
Pull the mask off of me, off of my anger.
We've got angry Al, just, Kemp, how'd you do this to me? We're going down this road again. And if we were able to just pull that mask off and find what was really going on, what do you think we would find?
What word am I looking for? I've got the word and I'm not able to say it here. I don't know. I'll think of it. I'll think of the word.
Is it grief?
No, it's not. It's not. It's almost
Sadness?
like it's
Hurt?
almost like I was let down, right?
Disappointment?
It's almost like disappointment. Yeah, it was like I
Yeah.
got build up, thinking, oh, this is great, right? I'm working on me, she's working on her, great up. And then it's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a catcher in Major League, gonna be catching a ball that a pitcher's throwing 98 miles an hour. I'm not gonna wear a cup. I'm not gonna wear any protection. I'm not gonna wear a mask. And it's like, bam!
Yeah.
Oh shit, that hurt. Right? That's what it
Yeah.
felt like to me. And I'm
Right.
just
So
trying
the
to
honest,
describe it. Yeah.
When
yeah,
those
the
relapse,
honesty,
oh, sorry, you go.
just the honesty can then say, wow, spouse, I was like putting a lot of my hope on where this was going, and I'm dealing with a lot of disappointment. And you can own that to whatever level you want. You can say something like, and I realize that might have put some pressure on you because I'm feeling that now, right? And then it just opens the door for your new homework assignment. You know, how can I not build my happiness on my partner's sobriety, right? That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
That is some beautiful work to do. But once you start chasing that, once you start heading down that road, the next time they relapse, the dialogue's different, right? Because you're like, well, I'm working on not building my happiness on your sobriety. So I'm actually not going to get involved here. Is there anything I can do to help? I'm like, sorry that happened, but I'm not going to give you the silent treatment. You don't have to sleep on the couch. Because I know I'm actually imperfect at the thing I'm working on right now. So you get a pass to be imperfect with yours, right? If that's where you're at, right?
Yeah.
If the boundary is, if this happens again, we're separating, then you got to enforce the boundary, right? But I don't know if you guys ever watched Scooby-Doo, but like every single episode, they find the perpetrator, they pull off the mask, and you like can't believe who it is. In my experience working with couples, working with people, that's honesty. Honesty is when you can pull the mask off of yourself and say, ooh, I am so pissed, but I have awareness and I have introspection and the tools to pull my mask off and go, I'm just hurt. I'm just hurt right now.
And that's
And I'd love to be here to support you right now, but I'm a human. I'm not God. And I actually just need to go get some ice cream because I'm hurt. I'm hurting. So just be patient with me. And I can be patient with you, but like see me as I see you, right? And so and heck, maybe they want to go to ice cream together. I don't know. You can both eat ice cream on separate sides of the ice cream parlor and cope with your problems. But that's just what that honesty can sound like when we start to take off our own mask. And that's like getting emotionally naked and has a special kind of intimacy. Whereas I can let down my walls in front of you and we can see each other emotionally naked, right? And we can respect that. It feels safe, right? We're not going to jump on each other. We're not going to make fun of what we see. We're just going to witness each other, right?
Yeah.
And let that be. And it takes two.
And it takes time, right? I mean, hearing you explain it, I'm like, this is great. I love what you're saying. And however, I'm picturing myself, right? I start out with like a little birdie racket, the game birdie, and then before I know it, I got the freaking baseball bat and I'm chasing you down the hall because I'm gonna whip your
Yeah.
ass. So
Yeah.
it takes some work. It's work on both of our parts. And I know Janessa and I, we've spoke a lot, even back when we used to go into the studio, would talk a lot before shows would start. And we have both learned so much, about addiction, and really also more so, I believe, about ourselves, right? What we can tolerate and what we've learned to do. And there's still so much work left. I mean, really,
It never stops.
right. It doesn't, and I'm a firm believer that, I mean, I will never stop working on myself until the day God calls me home. I will continue
Yeah.
to always strive to be a better individual. And it's really crazy because 2.5 years here, I'm thinking, holy shit, man, I'm interviewing hundreds and hundreds. I just did our 200th episode that just came out yesterday, right? And I'm going, I've got this. I've really got this, even though I don't understand fully, but I got this. And then it happened again, and I'm going, oh shit, I don't got this. I'm not even close, right? I'm not even close. So was this just another poke in my side, another pebble put in my shoe to go? And my ego, right? It was like, oh, the ego saying, yeah, you got this. And I just took a huge blow. And it's taken me some time to chill. I have matured because I was actually on the internet looking up divorce sites. I was ready to put my card number in and file, and I really stopped myself and went, I am making an emotional decision right now. This is not the time to make that decision, right? Because this could be huge. It's a huge decision.
Yeah.
And it's really helped me also, I think, with me holding the boundaries, like you said, to step away, let me figure out what my issues are with this, give her a chance to do hers, and then also give my emotions a chance to calm down, to where I can start thinking straight. Because Yeah, it's we seem to base a lot of things, our decisions, off of emotions. And when we're going through those emotions, we're not making the right decisions.
Yeah. I've been helping someone through recovery, and they're a while ago, they're like, so when do you not have to go to like therapy anymore and have to go through all this pain and like working on this stuff? And I'm like, you always do. Once you get on that recovery train, you're going on that for life. It'll look different at every phase you're at, but I feel like you can never get off of that. You are always going to be going on that. And something in a phase that I'm in right now, I'm realizing too that in the beginning of therapy, I thought, oh, it'll be so great when I'm not triggered anymore. It'll be so great when I don't feel this way anymore. No, I am triggered a lot. And I do feel a lot of pain and hurt when things are done, like by loved ones or and stuff like that. Like that never goes away. It's just how you react to it. Like Al, like you're gonna be like it's totally normal for you to be feeling angry and sad and all those feelings. It doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean you're bad. It's completely normal, especially at the phase of recovery that you guys are at. Like you said, I took off the helmet. I took off the padding and all that because I thought, things were going so well. You took your guard down. And then you got hit with a 98-mile-per-hour ball. Like, yeah, it hurts so bad. And I remember that. It's like it almost hurts more the longer the relapses go because you are getting comfortable. You're letting your hair down. You're being more honest. You're being more vulnerable. Because before I put myself in a big, thick cast iron box and I'm like, yeah, try getting through this. But I also wasn't healing and letting and getting anything out either. Like that's what recovery is. You are out and like Brene Brown says, you're out in the middle of it fighting. You're getting dirty. You're vulnerable. And there's a lot of people sitting up in the stands, thinking, oh my gosh, you're crazy. I can't believe that. How embarrassing. But that's where all of the magic happens. That's where the healing happens. That's where, you get so hurt, but you also get to experience joy and happiness at a level I don't think a lot of people can if they're not in that recovery. It is so it's the pendulum. You go through this amount of pain and heartbreak, but you're going to experience joy and happiness so much on the other side. And it's worth it, even though it's very painful.
It is, but it is worth it. You're 100% right, JANESSA, and you nailed it. I would have to say ditto with everything that you say, or I concur. How's that? That's my big word for the show.
Well, last thing I'll say, just kind of like a plug, but me and all the other partners here at Accepted, we have a very dedicated philosophy for wanting our clients to fire us as soon as possible. We all share that we believe in the healed person. And so a lot of what we do here is going to be very different than what people are used to in traditional talk therapy. It's going to be a lot more experiential. And I really truly believe, and I believe this with every part of me. If I didn't, I really wouldn't be doing this, that the pain that we are all carrying has a beginning and an end. It's almost always attached to an event, to a series of events, oftentimes from childhood. And if we can just process that, then it's over. It had a beginning, it had an end, but you've carried it your whole life because you've just been unwilling to go there and process it because it's terrifying and you haven't known how. And so here at Accepted and as a coach, I work with people to process these things that have happened, these events, these emotions. And once they've been processed, that's when trauma becomes just your story, right? It's no longer your trauma. It's just your story because you're not carrying it in your backpack anymore. It's all gone through the processor and you can show up. And I don't think that means going to therapy forever. And I've seen people, you know, go through that process. We do intensive retreats in Hawaii where it's a 5-day intensive workshop. And people just get the chance to process everything, you know, like Al, to just sit down with your wife and figure out at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom, what is that pain? What is that wound? And oftentimes it's something that she picked up in childhood, and how she's coped with it over her lifetime is look different. And that's kind of the story of all of us. And if we can just process that event, process those emotions, it's the closest thing to a day night change I've seen, is people just not carrying that in their backpack anymore. And it's unbelievable who they are after that stuff has been processed. People can book either at acceptedlife.com, or I have a website, natejohansen.com, JOHANSEN, and you can book a session and kind of experience some experiential therapy or coaching instead of just the talk therapy that everybody kind of goes through.
I love it. And I bet there's a ton of wives that hear this show going, I'm sending my husband there, because if that TMS helps his memory, we're there.
If I can change it how he feels about Costco.
Right? Yeah. Well, he may change it to Sam's Club. Who knows? Home Depot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Seriously, I'll be sending people your way. This is really awesome.
yeah,
Thanks,
Like you're-
Jessica.
this has been a really good show. So much information, a ton of information. This has really, really been good. It's helped me a lot. I think this show came at a perfect time for me, in all honesty. With what you just got done saying, Nate, was that pretty much what you wanted our listeners to gain from the show and your main message?
Well, obviously I wanted to come see me, but the main message is, you know, addiction is the symptom, and people make sense. People, we misunderstand so much because we just want to blame and name, right? But people make sense. And if we're willing to walk somebody backwards through what they're feeling and what they've experienced, their behavior makes a lot of sense. And I think both the addict and the betrayed to some extent feels ashamed about the way they handle things. And so to just come to a space and know, hey, this all makes sense, and it isn't actually the problem. The problem is further inside. Right. And I would also say to anybody hearing this message that feels a huge amount of resistance, to take that as a large indicator that there's something in you that needs some attention. Right. If you absolutely refuse to think that your addiction or your partner's addiction has anything to do with you, or has anything to do, or that there's nothing you can do to improve the situation, I would challenge that. I think there is. I think all of us to some extent are guilty of bringing our past into our present unfavorably. And if we can just work through that, we can show up and live a little bit more intentionally and with more compassion for each other.
Nailed it. Yeah, that's a mic drop.
I love it.
Janessa, is there anything you would like to say before we wrap this up?
Oh, I love everything that you've said, Nate. It's
Thanks.
very inspirational, very resonating. I love it. And I'll be telling people about it and sending them your way for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Nate and Janessa, guys, thank you so much. Thank you a ton for taking time out of your day today. I mean, we've gone well over an hour, and that's okay. We don't really have a time limit, as Janessa knows on this show. We let it go till we think all the information is out. So thank you to the both of you, for your friendship, for your love, for what you do to help others, because I am a firm believer now that we are all here to help others get through whatever it is we're going through, right? Or they're going through, and then we have others that are helping us get through what we're going through. If we showed a little bit more love and kindness, this world would be a hell of a lot better place. That's for doggone. and stop pointing the fingers, because there ain't a one of us that's perfect. Not a one of us
Yeah.
there. So again, guys, thank you. We'd like to say thank you to all our listeners and all our guest co-hosts. And it's been a while since we've had a guest co-host. So it's been fun having JANESSA back on the show. It's brought back a lot of memories from a long time ago. And, thank you to all our sponsors. Guys, again, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for all you guys. And that is so true. Even though the shows air the other side of addiction, that's just the platform. The show is every one of you guys out there. So thank you for being a part of it. And before we sign off, guys, mark your calendar, October 7th at 1 o'clock at the Miller Free Enterprise in Sandy. The third Healing Utah Success Summit is coming up, and you do not want to miss it. We've got my good friend Mallory Roosh is going to be speaking. We've got the guy who emceed our April event. We got Curtis Marsh. He's speaking. His nickname was Chaos. And you can kind of picture what his past used to be if he's got a nickname called Chaos, right? And Brad Neufeld, the owner of Brazilian Stock Network, will be speaking, and I will be speaking as well. Guys, we're going to fill the auditorium. We had 130 something last time. I know we will have 300 plus this time. So get your calendars out, mark it, and check rooshrecovery.com. And you can go in there and get your ticket. We'd love to have you guys, and it's on Eventbrite too. So again, love you guys. Thank you for all your support. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.